in the dog days of summer, we got something else, you know, to be racing for.
He felt like he was racing for his job because how good Joe Gibbs Racing is that just kind of where the sport is now?
We were just trying to get to the track last year a lot of weeks, and this year I feel like we took a big step in the off season of getting some good inventory, building some good cars, knowing where our strong suits were.
Welcome on to the Backstretch. I'm News 5's Heather Williams, and unfortunately, it is another sad week for race fans, really NASCAR fans across the country, particularly here in Southwest Virginia. Larry McClure, one half of the dynamic 80s and 90s racing team, Morgan McClure Motorsports. He passed away on Wednesday at 81 years old. The irony of it is that he passed away a little over a week after Charlie Henderson passed away. Those two were neighbors during the heyday of their race careers, both of them in Abingdon, Virginia, exit 19. The Henderson shop is still there. McClure moved out to exit 22, I think late 80s, early 2000s, maybe even a little later than that, till the time that they closed their doors. But those two were friends. A lot of people work for one or the other or both shops. They work together a lot of times. Both wildly successful beyond their resources, did some amazing things in the sport. We're definitely going to take a lot of time with Chris because Chris had the privilege to work for both men as well as Ed Whitaker, who is also no longer with us, legendary race team owner in Southwest Virginia as well. So Chris will share his memories of Larry. I did not know Larry as well as I knew Charlie. I did talk to Larry several times. He still hung around Charlie's shop from time to time. I enjoy talking to Larry every time that I talk to him. Maybe my favorite conversation with him was with him and his business partner and co-team owner, Tim Morgan, when we talked about the anniversary of them winning the night race here in Bristol. I mean, that's their home race. Larry called that the biggest win in their racing career, and they won back-to-back Daytona 500s, won the 500 3 times, but the night race to him was the biggest win. So really sad times for the racing community here, and my heart goes out to Larry's family and to all that knew him. And we're definitely going to spend extended amount of time with Chris talking about Larry's legacy and what he did for racing in general as well as in Southwest Virginia. Also got to talk about Chase Briscoe. What an amazing weekend for him to finally get his first win. The in-season tournament. I'm going to talk about that, my final thought, so I'm really not going to spend too much time on it here, but I love the idea. I love the concept of that. So we'll get into it with Chris. And then my guest this week is Erik Jones. Had Erik on the podcast earlier this year, catching up Legacy Motorsports in a much better position now than they were last year and then when we talked earlier in the year. Always love talking to Erik. He's really honest answers, well thought out answers. I also talk to him not just about racing. We'll talk to him about fatherhood. Cutest little guy. He's got the cutest little guy running around with him. And, you know, has that changed him? Not off the track, because it changes everybody off the track, but has that changed him on the track? Really interesting thoughts from Erik. So let's get going. Joining us now is our crew chief, Chris Carrer, who is also the crew chief for the number 75 Food Country truck in the Craftsman Truck Series. Chase Briscoe gets a win at Pocono, locking himself into the playoffs. He said in the post-race interview he needed to get this win. So just how big is this win for Briscoe and the 19 team?
Heather, I think anybody, it's huge. I think anybody that this time of year, now we're approaching the middle of the season, it's the hot summer months. It's dog fights at the racetrack. You know, most places everybody's miserable because they're hot and sweaty and aggravated and so on. And these races are tough. And anybody who is in a position right now without a win and goes into one of these midsummer races, it's right around, playoffs are right around the corner. They're not that far away, and they know it. And they're counting down the races, and they're looking at like, okay, which races have we been good at? Which races do I feel confident at as a driver? Crew chiefs are the same way. Everybody else, they're looking at it. They're counting down the days, the weeks, the races, wanting to get in that playoffs. And to get a win now it's you know, it's got to be just an incredible, huge sigh of relief for him and the team and everybody on the team, because now they can say, okay, let's start working on what we're going to do once the playoffs get here, and we can roll the dice a little bit now. We won a race. Now we want to win more. We don't have to worry about points, really, and we can get stage points. We can win stages. We can do this. We can do that. We can start running our race strategy way different than somebody who is not in the playoffs, and especially the ones that are not even close to getting in on points, which is a few.
Right.
And the ones that are on that cut line, you know, a little bit above, a little bit below, they're sweating mosquitoes, you know, every week, wanting not to make a mistake and hoping that they can ease their way, you know, get some points and get ahead of some of the guys that they're competing with. It's summer dogfight days.
So are you surprised that Briscoe felt so much pressure to win? He's not even 6 months into being in the 19 car, but he said on the post-race show he felt like he was racing for his job because how good Joe Gibbs Racing is. Is that just kind of where the sport is now?
I think it's where the sport is now. I think it's what these guys are like. There's just a lot of money involved. There's a lot at stake, and you know, he took over basically for Martin Truex Jr., who had been very successful in Gibbs cars through the years and had done some really good things, won some races, so on and so forth. And I don't know. I think some people in the sport were surprised when Chase Briscoe was announced as a driver a little bit, and they probably looked at, okay, what about this one? What about that one? And you know, Chase knows, because he is one and has been one. There's a lot of hot young drivers out there. I mean, there's guys that got a lot of talent, and you know, the Carson Hosefars of the world right now that are they're going to get better, and bigger teams are going to start looking at those guys to say, hey, we need to get them before somebody else does and get them in our stuff. And then in 2 or 3 years, they'll be winning a bunch of races for us. So yeah, there's a lot of guys are looking in their rearview mirror. They're looking behind them to say, I better get with it here, or I might not be where I'm at again. It's just that kind of sport. I'm sorry. Sometimes it's cold and cruel, but the window of success is very narrow. The window of opportunity is very narrow, and there's a lot of people out there wanting to be one of the guys. And there's a lot of young drivers coming along. There have been. Chase Briscoe was one of them that worked up through the ranks, and now he's in one of the premier rides, and I'm sure he feels down deep that he should win. And he did, and now we'll see what he does with the rest of the season.
Speaking of, NASCAR's first in-season tournament starts this week. 4 weeks, March Madness style bracket, 32 drivers, $1 million on the line. So I ask you, do you think that this will maybe break up the little bit of summer lull that we usually get around this time of year?
Yeah, well, yes. Heather, I guess, to be quite honest with you, I can't give you a good answer. I don't know what it's going to do, because this now is something way different. And you know, maybe there's been some talk that, like, okay, they need to replace the All-Star race, they need to replace this, they need to do this, they need to not do that. You know, and maybe this might be the answer. Maybe this is what captures the audience, the spectator, the TV audience, the fan base attention. Here again in the dog days of summer, we got something else, you know, to be racing for and keeping up with. And I'm going to stand back and watch and say, well, you know, okay, I don't know. I'm waiting on what's going to happen here. I'm scratching my head just a little bit, and you know, this is again. I think it's just another step for NASCAR trying to find better entertainment in their entertainment.
I mean, it's working for me, right? I am fascinated by this thing. Yeah. I looked at some of the first round matchups. I don't know if you looked at them. Joey Logano has Alex Bowman in the first round. Tyler Reddick and Kyle Larson in the first round. Bubba Wallace and Daniel Suarez in the first round. And then, to me, those are all the tough ones. To me, the most interesting matchup, because I think it's going to be underrated, primed for an upset, is the 132 matchup between Denny Hamlin and Ty Dillon. And I'll tell you why. Because the first round is at Atlanta. And I'm pretty sure if you looked at the super speedway results over the last year and a half, that Ty Dillon has far outperformed Denny Hamlin at those races.
Denny's has struggled at Atlanta. We documented that, I believe it was last year, you know, and he really struggled and didn't seem to get up to speed and wanted to ride at the back of the pack all day long to stay out of trouble and kind of floundered around a little bit. So I don't know, you know, that could be upset city right there. And I guess my wonder about all this is like, okay, it is going to divert attention away from the normal, everyday, let's win the race to win the race. Let's get as much points as we can. Let's worry about the championship. Let's worry about getting in the playoffs. Let's worry about getting playoff points. Let's look at the big picture. Well, now this is a pretty big picture. And I don't care. They're human. These guys are going to be thinking about it. The drivers are going to be thinking about it. The crew chiefs, you know, I don't know about the race engineers, but there's people going to be thinking about it, and they're going to be looking as they look about, okay, are we going to pit? Are we, you know, who are we trying to beat here? And they're going to be looking at, like, you know, Denny Hamlin's bunch is going to be, where's Ty Dillon? How's he doing? And the rest of the guys, Daniel Suarez and Bubba Wallace, they're going to be looking at one another and saying, okay, maybe this affects our decision because we want to beat who we're matched up against so we can go on.
Well, especially if you're a guy like Ty Dillon, who probably doesn't realistically have a chance to win a championship.
Nope.
But there's no reason why he can't just outperform 4 guys for a week. Especially with the tracks that are on this list.
Yeah, and I think this will be very interesting, and I'm just curious. I'm going to stand back with curiosity and say, okay, let's see how this plays out. Let's see how everybody kind of deals with this and how. I mean, I can just tell you, as a crew chief, you're going to be saying, oh, got something else to think about. But it's also another way to grab success, to have a successful season, to say, hey, I won that first NCAA tournament in race season ever. I'm the first one to do it. And, you know, anything is first. If you win Bowman Gray, if you win the first dirt race, if you win the first road race at a certain place, or win the first time at Atlanta reconfigured, or anything like that, it's something to stick your chest out about a little bit. And everybody likes to do that. Everybody that's human, they like to be able to say, yeah, we did that for the first time. And I think it's just going to be, I think it's going to be pretty exciting. I think the TV people, the coverage people, the media will watch it and make sure that all of us at home know about it and know what's going on and are aware of the matchups and what's going on. So, you know, I hope it will raise the level of entertainment to our race fans as much as NASCAR's wanting it to. We'll see. Atlanta's a good place to start.
Well, and speaking of Atlanta, how much of a challenge is the new Atlanta, or as it's known now, Echo Park Speedway?
Heather, it makes me, when I turn the TV on to watch it, it just makes me nervous, you know, getting like, okay, these guys are going to go that fast at a 1.5 mile racetrack with a dog leg in the front straightaway, so it's not really a true oval, and they're going to run out of room. You know, we talk about, we've had Michigan and we've had Pocono in the last 3 weeks, and we talk about, okay, they're going to go 4 wide, 5 wide. They might even get 6 wide on a restart and this, that. Well, they do that because there's room. You know, I mean, Pocono, they got room to run 10 wide down that straightaway, and they can do it for a long time and still not run out of racetrack. Now, they're eventually going to, if they don't near there, they're going to crash. But Atlanta, they're going to be 3 wide. We've learned that. We've seen that. They're going to be 2 wide a whole race. They're going to be 3 wide a lot. And if you look at the dimensions of the track, I mean, there's not that much room. There's no extra space, and they're going 200 miles an hour and all over one another, and they're doing it, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 rows deep. And it's just, I mean, I went to Atlanta to watch races when I was 16 in the 70s, and it was the old original, you know, and it was pretty fast then. And there was room to run 3 wide. And a lot of people ran right up against the wall simply because there wasn't nowhere else to run good. So this is, to me, it's just, I keep telling myself that we shouldn't be doing this. This is not, y'all need to slow down. This is not safe, and they just keep doing it. 3 wide, 3 wide, 3 wide, and here they go cutting underneath, and it's running this far. It really to me, it shows, it kind of really glares at how good these guys are. I mean, to run a 3,500-pound stock car around there at 200 miles an hour, and they're inches off one another the whole day, and rows of them, and they're still trying to bump and push and this and that, trying to get around one another and just keep getting it. And it's pretty fingernail biting, So we'll see. I hope the weather's good. Find out what happens down there. It's not many dull moments in that race.
So it was another tough week for the Southwest Virginia racing community and really the entire NASCAR community.
Yep.
Larry McClure, former owner of Morgan McClure Motorsports. I mean, I think everybody has that image of that yellow Kodak number 4 car.
Yeah, beautiful.
Maybe one of the prettiest paint schemes ever in NASCAR. He passed away on Wednesday. Chris, I know he was a good friend of yours.
Yes.
And I know it's really hard to really paint a picture of just how important he was, but how important a character was he in, you talk about the history of racing, especially around here in Southwest Virginia? Well,
for this area especially, but for NASCAR Cup Series racing in general, I was fortunate enough, I got to see the start of it. When Larry started his team, I happened to be coming home from ETSU every day, going back and forth, working for Ed Whitaker, driving back and forth to Johnson City every day, and I would stop by G.C. Spencer's house in the basement where he kept his racing car. He had one and some equipment. G.C. ran a few races at that time, and they became acquainted. And I remember when I drove up one day, and Larry and his family, I can't remember who all, were in G.C.'s basement, and I just kind of walked in, and I knew, okay, this doesn't concern me. I sat over here out of the way and kept quiet until they left. And I asked GC, I said, who were those people? And he said, that was Larry McClure. He's from up around Chilhowie, up that way, okay? And I said, well, what's going on or whatever? And I'm just verbatim. GC said, well, I'm hoping they're going to buy all this damn junk. So he did. And Larry, that's the way the race team started. And within 2 or 3 months, I can't remember, I went to most of the first year races. That was 1983 with them. They had Mark Martin for most of the year. I think sometime in the middle of the summer, they bought a car from A.J. Foyt that had been wrecked and repaired. It was a Monte Carlo, and it was a lot of race car. And they went to Talladega, the summer race, which I think was in July at the time, maybe August. But it ran really well. I mean, it qualified well, it ran well. And I think at that time, I think that day it kind of bit Larry, like, okay, we can do this. And Heather, from then on, I didn't work for Larry until the 2000s. But I worked at Henderson Racing, which at the time was basically right next door to the Morgan McClure shop at that time off exit 19. And when I wasn't working for Charlie, I was working for Ed Whitaker, and we were right down the street, and we kept up. We were around, well, when I was at Food Country Shop, I was next door neighbors, and I spent a lot of time over there. I remember they would, and to watch Larry, who started out, trust me, and he would tell you that, he told me this many times. He said, I didn't know beans from apple butter about things. He was green as a gourd. And he started building that team. He moved to that shop. He started building that team. They started buying better cars, started putting bodies on eventually themselves. They did all their own body work. They had the nicest looking race cars in the garage area from basically the word go over anybody. Anybody. Rick Hendrick, Jack Roush, Roger Penske, Richard Childress, I don't care who. the Morgan McClure cars were neater, nicer, better looking, and like you mentioned, that Kodak paint scheme for so many years, if you were standing on the truck or if you were in the stands or I don't care where, and you were looking over here and you looked over here at the pack, that car stood out. Whether most times it was up front, but whether it was up front, middle of the pack, back of the pack, or whatever, that's the car that stood out. And they did a tremendous job for Kodak representing their products and their company. And they finally won races with Ernie Irvin and then later on Sterling Marlin. I think he won 14 Cup races, I believe.
Correct.
3 Daytona 500s,
Yeah.
count them. 3 Daytona 500s. And had a chance to win more, and they had a tremendous super speedway program. But, you know, I'm just proud. I worked for Larry. Unfortunately, it was a time when kind of the success had gone away, and the funding had kind of really gotten hard to get, and so on and so forth. But it was still a lot of fun. We had good times. Larry, like Charlie Henderson and like Ed Whitaker, taught me a lot, and they're responsible for most of what I have today and most of the success that I've enjoyed. I just, you know, having Charlie pass away last week and Larry this week, I'll be honest with you, it's pretty hard. And I have like a hole in my heart because I got people that I knew I could turn to and ask for advice and talk to about anything, and I knew they cared about me enough that they'd take time to do it and try to lead me down the right way and try to keep me from making wrong steps and just try to help me. So my prayers are to Jenny McClure and all of Larry's brothers and family, Jerry, Ted, Eddie, and Tim Morgan, all the families. I mean, they're just wonderful people.
Well, you know,
So
Tim
we're
said
gonna
it.
miss him.
Tim said it best in his statement that he released on Wednesday, which is they were just naive enough to think that they could do this, and
That's right.
and they did it, and they really provided hope and a pathway for everyone else that wanted to do this from this area.
Absolutely.
I mean, it seems so improbable that Southwest Virginia could produce so many big race teams that won a lot of races between,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
mentioned it, Ed Whitaker and Morgan McClure and Charlie Henderson, and all of the people that now work in racing or have in the past worked in racing because of those 3 men.
Yep.
Just incredible legacy.
It is incredible, and they weren't, if you think about it, how many actual air miles they were from one another, even from birth on, it's like, holy moly, we got a lot of history here.
Yeah.
You know, and in different phases, in different, you know, and
Well, they basically, I mean, I know Charlie was in all series, but basically different series. Because
ma'am.
McClure's success was mostly in the Cup Series, Ed was mostly in Xfinity, and Charlie's success, most of it has been in the Truck Series.
in the trucks, and some what was Xfinity. So,
Yeah.
I mean, they went down a little bit different paths, but I'm telling you that the common denominator between the 3 of those men was the fact that I'm not taking anything less than winning as our goal. Ed was the same way. If once he even when times were a little bit leaner before, you know, back when I was pretty young and we raced locally mostly, even then, if we went and run second or third at the local racetrack, you know, yeah, that's pretty good. We didn't tear the car up. We didn't tear anything up. We got, you know, and Ed was like, should have won. You know, we got to do something better to win. Larry McClure, once he didn't go into it to be second fiddle, and I'm gonna tell you, he was not intimidated by anybody, any of the what you call heavy hitters. He respected other people. He did things the right way. He tried to run a clean, well-kept, respectable operation. He wanted good people around him, and he didn't want to be he didn't want to be the guy that, like, oh gosh, we hate to see them coming. He did not want that. He wanted everybody to know that his stuff, he was going to make his stuff the best appearing, the neatest, the cleanest, the best, most respectable stuff out there. But now, he didn't. I mean, Richard Childress, Rick Hendrick, Jack Roush, Robert Yates. It didn't bother him because he knew. Larry knew. He said, "We can do that as good as they can. They may have a little more people, more funding, more this, more that, and everything like that, but and he still, Larry would come around and encourage me and Charlie and Don quite often. You know, he'd come by the shop and say, hey, he'd look, he said, hey, you doing good? These trucks look really good. And I'd like, well, we need to be better about this. We need to be better about that. And I'm not satisfied with this. And we're trying to make this better. And he'd always stop me and said, hey, wait a minute. He said, you guys have been running good. He said, you got good stuff. You got a real good driver. He said, you're going to get your chances, even after the Daytona thing. He was one of the first ones that told me, he said, don't worry about that. He said, you're going to win other races. Don't worry about that crap. You're not, they're really not going to take that away from you, but technically they did, but you're going to get more. He said, because y'all got good enough stuff to do it. He said, just go out. He said, Chris, just go out there and act like you own the place. And Larry was an encourager. And I don't know, I was very fortunate to be the three people from the time I was 14 years old, Heather, to now. That's a long time. That's 51 years, going on 52. And those three guys were in my life, very heavy, pretty much the whole way, whether I worked there or not. They were always friends of mine. And I will tell one story. This is the integrity of Morgan McClure Racing and Henderson Racing. Jackie and Mike Laughlin were car builders in the 80s, 90s, and up through 2000. They built a lot of race cars that won a lot of races. And I remember asking them one day, a conversation back, I said, who's the best for you guys? Who's the best customers? Who do you like to work with? Who? They said, you mean who pays their bills the most? I said, yeah. He said, Mike said, 3 people outclass everybody. He said, they're all Southwest Virginia. He said, the Wood Brothers, Morgan McClure, Food Country. Nobody else close. Now, let me tell you, they had a lot of customers, a lot. And he said, it's not even close. He said, we don't have to worry one lick about any of them. I said, man, that's pretty neat. And I kind of asked him about the worst ones, and the worst ones would be the ones that shock you. They were the biggest ones. So, what else is new?
Well, we're certainly going to miss him and Charlie, yes. And our thoughts and prayers go out to his family and his friends.
Absolutely.
Joining us now is Erik Jones, driver for Legacy Motor Club. 13th place finish at Pocono over the weekend. Before we get into some other stuff, how would you evaluate your run at Pocono?
Yeah, I think it was good. It seemed typical of our last month. We've ran really well and had speed. I don't think the finish is really representative of probably as good as our car was. Our strategy just didn't play out at the end. We ran good in both stages, and we pit there to try to kind of have better tires and take a little less fuel than guys. And the yellow came out right after we pit, and then we ended up having to restart back in, almost 18th place, and just didn't really get up there after that. So, I felt like we had top 10 speed for sure. Proud to get just some stage points and some more, not a bad finish. So we've been crawling up through these point standings week by week a little bit. And we just need to get the finishes there. It seems like every week we run well, don't close them out, and don't get quite the finish I feel like we are capable of, but we run good during the day.
So both you and your teammate were in the top 15. I mean, as far as legacy goes, another great weekend. What's the difference? Because, I mean, we talked about this, I think, earlier in the year when I talked to you, and I'm sure you talk about it all the time, but I don't think anybody saw this big of a jump for your organization coming. So what's been the biggest difference for you guys?
It's hard to say one thing. I think last year was challenging in a lot of ways, making the switch to Toyota. We had to take on a pretty heavy workload as far as tire modeling went, aero data went, car builds went. We were just trying to get to the track last year a lot of weeks. And this year, I feel like we took a big step in the off season of getting some good inventory, building some good cars, knowing where our strong suits were, and kind of playing to those. We also brought on some really good people that had a couple of months to settle in the off season and build out some things that we wanted to work on. And it's just finally kind of coming to fruition, which is good. If you put in all that work and you don't really see the result, and it can get pretty draining for everybody. So just happy to have those solid runs. But yeah, I don't think it's one thing. There's so many different areas that went into it to make our cars better, just to build a better, piece to go to the racetrack with was number one. This car is so unique in the way that you make it go fast, and it's not like it was in the old car that, there was the trick of the week kind of. You just have to do everything really well and all the small things really well to make the car go. And I felt like or feel like that's what we're doing right now. So yeah, a lot of little things, but it's paying off.
At this point in the season, are you guys still points racing or are you just going for wins?
We have been points racing a bit. Mexico, Pocono, we took our stage points there rather than jumping the stages, and have tried to gather up some points, which has paid off in a little bit of a way. We've moved up there a few spots, and I feel like our gap to the cut has stayed the same. Unfortunately, we've gained some spots in points, but we need to cut into that gap on the playoff line. The 88 winning was not a not a help for us at Mexico. But 61 points out, I believe, from the playoff cut right now, is not as a little farther back than you want to be, but I feel like attainable with some really good races. So, the guys ahead of us, we've been running right with every week. So we just have to do a little bit better and try to make it up. And I feel like we're in contention. If we can keep it right here and cut into it a little bit, the next couple will still be points racing, but we have a bad week in Atlanta. We're going to be right into a must-win situation, I feel like.
Before we got rolling here, I commented on your background and you talked about changing things around with the baby. How much does that change you? Maybe not even just so much as off the track, because I mean, everybody can relate with that, but does that change you the way you approach on the track at all?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think if anything, it probably drives you more. I think for years you race, and you're racing just for yourself, right? And then I got married, and then it becomes okay. Well, I'm racing. This is at the end of the day. I think sometimes people forget this is how we make a living too, right? So okay, now I'm racing for us and to make a living for me and Holly, and then David comes along, and not only are you racing for him too, but you're kind of, I feel like, racing to set an example. Not necessarily in the way that you drive or anything like that, but just in the perseverance. I want to be able to him one day look back and just kind of see the struggle, I guess, that I went through at times in my career, and know that I stuck with it. I didn't give up. I didn't quit. Worked and stuck with it to make it better. I think there's a lot of good lessons in there, and I don't want to ever have to be the hypocrite in any kind of situation of convincing him to stick something out. So that's important to me, and just kind of reflecting that same thing in my career.
You mentioned the struggles and all that you went through. I mean, you bounced around a lot early in your career. How nice is it for you to finally kind of have a home at Petty, which then turned into Legacy?
Yeah, it was kind of a goofy start for me. I started there at the 77 in Furniture Row, spent a couple of years in the 20, and now I've been at the 43 longer than anywhere else. So even in that, there was a lot of change, from year one to currently, but feel like we're pretty settled right now. I feel like I'm in a spot that I hope to be for a long time, especially with the performance that we're having currently, and enjoy working with the people that I'm with. Enjoy working with my team. I enjoy working with the rest of the group at Legacy, that in the management side and the performance side. So yeah, I'm definitely comfortable. Definitely feel that what early in my career you feel like you're a bit of a cog in the wheel, and sometimes you're afraid to speak up. And right now, feel like some leadership in my role and feel like I have a voice and able to make a difference on, what I'm looking for in a race car. So that's enjoyable too, as a driver. So yeah, it's definitely nice to be settled and just have a home and somewhere that I feel like I can be for a long time, right? I feel like I have a good, if I wanted to, I could probably race another 15 years pretty easily, and I could see that all being with legacy.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Good luck this weekend at Atlanta. Oh, let me ask you about Atlanta before we go. Um, can you prepare for that place at all? I mean, it seems like it's like I think I heard somebody describe it this weekend as like Daytona on steroids. Like how do you prepare for Atlanta?
Yeah, it's tough. Definitely watch the race back there and try to pick out what guys are doing. But it's I never got to race Daytona before they repaved it. I'd have to imagine it's pretty similar to that. It'll be really unique. This place is aging really fast, I feel like, and losing a lot of grip really fast. And as hot as it's going to be on Saturday, it's going to be a fine balance of, trimming your car out and making it handle well. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's a great way to prepare for it because it feels like it's so different every race. I don't feel like any race has ever been the same there, but it's definitely unique. It's very stressful. It's very high pace, high energy, a lot of big runs, a lot of big moves, and you're just locked in really hard for 400 miles. So it's a tough one for sure. It's honestly one of our tougher races of the year. But excited for it. I think everybody, it's still similar to a speedway race where you get a lot of guys unique that have a shot to win, and no reason we can't be in that category.
So as a guy who has some success in his back pocket at speedways, do you consider Atlanta in that category or is it its own category?
I think it's its own category. It's pretty unique compared to Daytona and Talladega. There's a bit you can take from there, but the way that you build runs and make moves and set your car up and approach the race, it's pretty different. It's definitely a different mindset. So, yeah, it's hard to compare. It's kind of its own animal. I don't know if I can compare it to much else.
For my final thought this week, let's talk about that in-season tournament that starts this weekend at Echo Park Speedway, the speedway formerly known as Atlanta Motor Speedway. It's almost like Echo Park is Prince. It's going to take me a while to get used to calling it that for sure. Um, this tournament, I'm obsessed with it. I love March Madness. I love filling out brackets. I love that time of year. Um, and I really think that this is going to be a fun little aside too. The doldrums of summer racing can sometimes get a little, tough to get through. It's nice. There's other things to do, little distractions, and not all the racetracks in the summer are great. Although this stretch of races is a pretty good stretch of races that we have coming up. But I just love the idea of it. I filled out my preliminary bracket. I talked about it with Chris. Christopher Bell is who I have winning in my little preliminary bracket. I may go back and give it a once over. I think this stretch of tracks really is right in Christopher's wheelhouse because you really are going to have to be diversified as a driver, but diversified in particular disciplines. It's the same reason why I also have Michael McDowell going really deep into there because, starts with super speedway, then back-to-back road courses. You have to be good at both those. And so I just love the idea of this. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think that there are people that are absolutely primed for upsets because not because of how they're running, but because of who they're paired against and the track they're at. I think I talked about it with Chris. Denny Hamlin hasn't been good in Atlanta. Ty Dillon has been pretty good at Atlanta. So is that the major upset right off the bat? Maybe. I think it'll be fun to see what might happen. And I think this is a genius idea by NASCAR. I think it will actually by Denny Hamlin, stolen by NASCAR. I think it's going to add a lot to the broadcast to keep it interesting, to keep eyes on the battles within the battles. In addition to, there are a lot of guys in this in-season tournament that need wins, that need to do something to make the playoffs. So just layer upon layer of intrigue. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm also looking forward to see how TNT handles its re-entry into the space of doing NASCAR and how this in-season tournament affects their broadcast, They're very good at bracket tournaments. They do March Madness. So I'll be interested to see if anything that they use on those broadcasts filter into this. I think it's going to be great starting this weekend in Atlanta at Echo Park Speedway. Still going to take a while to get used to that. Thanks for joining me on the Backstretch. We'll see you next week.